Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would give you guys a little bit about my thoughts on 45 ACP. As someone who's been loading mostly 9mm with some 10mm for the last couple years, after getting back into loading, after spending a few years away from doing it, just kind of things I'm observing loading 45 ACP. Now, most of you guys know I've switched over to mostly 45, 40, and then some 10mm, what I'm going to be shooting for handguns. I'm not saying I might not get back into revolver stuff eventually, but it's, again, of secondary use to me personally. Because I just think autos are generally more useful overall. But I'm not going to rule out wheel guns. I used to load a lot of 357 Magnum. My first handgun was a 357. And so I might go back to that one day. But for now, just different things I'm noticing different about 45 versus doing 9mm, and just little things I want to touch upon. I'm going to go ahead and just do a complete process on one of these while I talk about it a little bit. But one of the things I do like is just the really, really massive components. I'm not ever having to mess with little bitty 9mm cartridges and other stuff. And that is kind of a nice perk here when you're hand loading everything by hand. You're not running like a Dillon to where you're doing everything all at once. Again, it's just nice to have these nice big cartridges to work with. Now, one of the things that I've noted, having done a lot of small pistols, I've noticed, at least with all these Winchesters, because all I've been loading so far is Winchester. All right, that is something I will say, buying new 45 brass, not very cost effective. And with 9mm, I tend to buy a lot of once fired. But with this stuff, I decided to buy a bunch of Winchester brass, and I also bought 1,000 CCI Blazer just to have, although I didn't know when I first bought them they were small pistol, but I have thousands of small pistols, so not a big deal because I'm also loading 40, and I have been loading quite a bit of 40 recently. But just recently started doing my 45 because I've been going through this Winchester white box. After I got through about 350 rounds of the 1,000 rounds of it I bought, started messing with it. One thing I will notice with this Winchester, a lot of the primer pockets on my little tool here, because I like to do these just in lots, and I don't like to always lock this into my Lee press. This will mount to my Lee stand. This little bench priming tool, it will lock in there, but I like to just do them by hand here. One thing I noticed, these don't always seat as easily. Like, I've got to put a little more pressure getting these seated with these larger pistol primers. Now, I'm using Winchester large pistol primers in Winchester brass. Again, nice combinations, all Winchester. But mainly because I got a good deal on the Winchester primers, and I've been using these for 10mm. I got another 5,000 pack for loading all of this stuff, but I'm still working off of the last batch I bought for 10mm. Now, as far as powders go, one of the things that I've said before is that the 45 is forgiving because it has such a large cartridge. Right, it's such a large cartridge, and it's a low pressure round. There's a lot of powders that are actually really accurate in it. However, for me, I'm not wanting weak stuff. I'd said this is going to be a potential prepper cartridge for me. I don't want my plinking ammo moving 700 feet per second, because this might be raw scenario stuff too, any of my stuff that's stocked up. So I'm wanting to keep everything relatively fast, up at least close to the 850 feet per second range, if not higher. Well, there's only a handful of powders that do that underneath a max charge, and kind of the ones that I was looking at and deciding between were really Accurate number 5 and Power Pistol. They both look like good choices. However, my vendor that I prefer right now to buy my gunpowder from, because again, oftentimes their prices, is completely out of Power Pistol. In fact, my two favorite vendors were out of Power Pistol, and I got a good deal on 8 pounds of Accurate number 5. Now, what I will say, the pros and cons of using this for 45, the pros, this stuff meters like water. Even using this Lee, I've measured 20 charges in a row and got them absolutely perfect. They all came out on the digital scale at exactly 8 grains. I'm running 8 grains of it, which is just above a starting load. But considering I'm running just a hair longer than the minimum overall length, I'm shooting out of supported barrels, I'm not really worried about pressure. To be perfectly honest, I'm running barrels that will handle 45 Super. I'm using Glocks that are in good shape, but with fully supported aftermarket barrels. I'm not worried about starting slightly above a starting load. I'm just not. In fact, I would probably safely feel comfortable going all the way to a max load, considering I know the quality of the brass. I'm using Winchester brass, know the quality of the components. It's all good. This stuff meters like water. Like even just using a one like this that drops off of volume without using a digital scale, without using my Hornady lock and load because it takes longer, it's been consistent. I got it where I tried 20 in a row, and I literally dumped 20 in a row that were exactly 8.0 grains when I ran them on a digital scale. That's close enough for me. They're all staying within 0.1, 20 in a row. I can produce a lot of them this way quickly. The downside, the generous size of it. Power pistol is fluffier, even though it's very similar in terms of velocity as far as what you can get. It's very similar in terms of burn rates. It's fluffier than this stuff. So I do see why a lot of people like power pistol, which is actually what's in all your NATO 9mm. I do see why people like power pistol because you can get past a 50% case fill. This, looking at it, is probably just under half of a case full. Now that's fine if you're someone who pays a lot of attention to what you're doing, because again, this is a very forgiving cartridge, but the downside is that a lot of that forgivingness comes from having a really generous case capacity. With this particular powder, it is actually possible to double charge. I could drop 2 in here, and if I don't look down and look at it to see that it's full close to the top, you wouldn't realize it, and then you've got a potential accident on your hands, a very serious one that could damage your firearm, damage you, possibly damage bystanders. Something you need to be very, very aware of. And there are very, very few gunpowders that give more than a 50% fill on these cases on the 45. Off the top of my head, the only popular one I see is power pistol. When you're dealing with starting loads or lower end of the loads, a lot of the ones to get to a 50% or higher case fill, you've got to be pushing near a max pressure load. So that is definitely a downside to this cartridge with most powders. So in retrospect, even though this stuff meters well, and I'll be very careful about it, I would personally feel a little more comfortable utilizing a powder eventually if I keep loading tons of 45 in the future that fills it better. So power pistol might be better. Now I don't know if power pistol is going to meter as well as this. Power pistol does meter well, but this stuff literally, if you see how fine the spherical balls are, you'll understand. This stuff meters like water. It doesn't seem to get inside of any of the, sometimes you get the little flakes will work their way through this little lead dispenser and kind of clog it up a little bit. These don't seem to be doing that at all. So accurate number 5 is pretty awesome there. The only downside to it, because again, you can get pretty high velocities out of it for 45 with modest pressure. It meters like water, so it's fantastic for people who don't want to run a digital scale and everything. The only downside is less than a 50% case fill. With my target loads, which are going to put me somewhere in the 830 to 850 range. With a normal length barrel, I would need to chrono them with these 6-inch barrels to see where they're at. But that's one of the downsides. The upsides, though, again, using these big components, everything just goes so smoothly. Everything just flows smooth. I'm not having any issues with any binding and everything. It's just nice comfortable seat. Nothing feels like it's going to slip out of my fingers. I haven't accidentally dropped a bullet like you do all the time with 9mm and stuff. But yeah, just seating it and crimping it, everything's good. And yeah, I'm running these just a little bit above 1.25, normally 1.25 inches for this particular load for a 230 FMJ, which is what I'm using. And look at those pretty brass case bullets. Love that. Has a nice look to it, doesn't it? I don't know if you guys can see it from there. Might show some of these later. But yeah, I'm running them a little longer. I'm running them at 1255 because I noticed at 1255 the bullet passed the plunk test in all of my barrels, because I have 4 different aftermarket barrels right now, and I ran it through one of the factory Glocks, dropped it in. So I did 5 plunk tests, passed all of them, and it fits in the magazine without making any contact by dropped it in and dropped a couple of Winchesters above it. Pushed them in and they fit perfectly, so I'm running it a little longer than the minimum, which is always good. It gives you wiggle room on pressure, and ideally, if you can run bullets out a little longer, it's actually usually advisable to do so. If possible, you'll usually get, again, a little better accuracy. You can sometimes run them a little hotter, a little more velocity, because you have a little bit more wiggle room on pressure. So when it's possible for you to do so in your barrel and your magazine, running a little longer than the minimum overall length is actually a good thing. It actually gives you, again, sometimes more accuracy, and it gives you a little bit better margin for error on pressure for safety. So it's not a bad thing at all. But yeah, overall, I mean, those are a lot of my thoughts on just having started loading 45 again here. I messed with some 45 many, many years ago, but I will be the first to admit I didn't load a lot of it. I didn't load a lot of it compared to other calibers. But yeah, I like it as far as just a nice, fun cartridge to load, because I mean, you just got these big, generous cartridges. So many components available, so many different powder selections available for things that work great. And I actually am finding it's not that expensive to load. If you look around with what a lot of bullet makers are doing, grain for grain, a lot of the 230 FMJs are not actually as expensive as you would think. Meaning, it's not like you pay twice the price for a 230 grain that you're paying versus a 115 for 9mm. It hasn't been my experience if that's the case. I'm seeing a lot of it out there, sometimes 30% more, 40% more. Something in that range for a 230 grain 45 FMJ. I don't want to use plated in these. I've had bad experiences with plated bullets so far. I don't like them in comparison. I mean, I can use them, but I prefer full metal jacket, and that includes even these. Yes, I'll pay a little more for it, but I prefer full metal jacket. But yeah, I mean, the 45 is just a nice, fun cartridge to load. Again, other than the risk of double charging, which you need to be very, very careful of. Now, I'm doing these one at a time while I'm just chatting here, but normally what I do like to do just to avoid that is do what I'm doing right here. Put them one at a time and have each one ready to go where I can look down at a whole tray later. Again, a little bit of safety you can run if you're going to run something like this instead of a progressive press or an automated system like something like Dylan. I don't even know what the term would be for that. I'm calling it automated. I like to do it like this, to where frequently I can go through and fill up a whole tray like this old Winchester box, and fill the entire tray up, and then I can look down at it and see that each one is around half or less full. So there's no chance of a double charge, no chance of missing one and making a squib, and just have them done one at a time, then push my powder to the side, and then go over and load. And that's mostly what I've been doing with this. And that will eliminate that problem, because there's less margin for error, there's less chance of you doing it, because that really does need to be your real concern with this. But the upside of me using this old Winchester stuff, because I started with the white box, even though I have ammo cans for this, it's letting me go back, and since I'm reloading all the Winchester, I still have all the original boxes for the 1,000 of these I bought. I bought 20 of these 50 packs, and I can just put my notes on the outside. I can put the number of reloads that's there, so I know how many times each of these have been loaded. And I bought enough components to reload each one of these about 5 times. So I have 5,000 bullets, 5,000 primers, and more than enough gunpowder, the accurate number 5, to make 5 reloads of each of these 1,000. So I'm going to end up getting 6,000 total rounds out of this original Winchester purchase, which I think is a pretty good deal, considering I bought all my bullets bulk, bought the primers bulk, 5,000 at a time, bought the powder at the same time I bought the primers, so that I paid a single hazmat fee for 5,000 primers and 8 pounds of powder. So I ended up with just one hazmat fee for everything. So it makes it dramatically cheaper than buying it at the local shop, a pound at a time or 1,000 at a time. This is going to end up being pretty cost effective for me to shoot. And that's, again, a lot of people's big complaint with 45 is, oh, it's a little more expensive to shoot. Well, you hand load it like this, it isn't. And it's really easy to hand load. It really is. It's just a very forgiving cartridge in general. There's less clumsiness involved dealing with these big cases and bullets. It's just, I don't know, just a pleasure to load it. It's relaxing. I enjoy it. And I'm glad I am messing with 45 now just because of that. Even though I will be doing a lot of 40 S&W also, I do kind of enjoy loading 45. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.